And that's why the work is going to be so important between now and the end of June to memorialize this so that we can all examine it. And we don't have to speculate on what the meaning of a deal is going to be. Either there's going to be a document that Iran agrees with the world community about and a series of actions that have to be taken, or there's not. Part of the challenge in this whole process has been opponents of basically any deal. With Iran have constantly tried to characterize what the deal is without seeing it. Now, if we are able to obtain a final deal that comports with the political agreement, and I say if because that's not yet final, then I'm absolutely positive that that is the best way to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And that's not my opinion, that's the opinion of people like Ernie Moniz, my Secretary of Energy. Who is a physicist from MIT and actually knows something about this stuff. That's the opinion of a whole bunch of nuclear experts who examined the deal. Very rarely do you see a consensus. Consensus is too strong a word. A large majority of people who are experts in the field saying this is actually a realistic, plausible, meaningful approach to cut off the pathways for Iran getting a nuclear weapon. And that it is more likely to succeed not only than maintaining current sanctions or additional sanctions. But more likely to succeed than if we took a military approach to solving the problem. Again, that's not uniquely my opinion. That is, talk to people who are not affiliated with the administration. some of whom were skeptical about our capacity to get a deal done and have now looked at it and said if we're able to actually get what was discussed in the political framework, it's absolutely the right thing to do. Now, there's politics and political pressure inside of the United States. We all know that. The Prime Minister of Israel is deeply opposed to it. I think he's made that very clear. I have repeatedly asked. What is the alternative that you present that you think makes it? Less likely for Iran to get a nuclear weapon, and I have yet to obtain a good answer on that. And the narrow question that's going to be presented next week when Congress comes back is what's Congress's appropriate role in looking at a final deal. And I've talked to not only Bob Corker, but I've talked to Ben Cardin, the ranking member on the Democratic side. And I want to work with them so that Congress can look at this deal when it's done. What I'm concerned about is making sure that we don't prejudge it. Or those who are opposed to any deal whatsoever try to use a procedural argument essentially to screw up the possibility of a deal. Last comment I'm going to make on this. When I hear some, like Senator McCain recently, suggest that our Secretary of State, John Kerry, who served in the United States Senate, a Vietnam veteran, who's provided exemplary service to this nation, is somehow less trustworthy in the interpretation of what's in a political agreement than the Supreme. Leader of Iran. That's an indication of the degree to which partisanship has crossed all boundaries. And we're seeing this again and again. We saw it with the letter by the 47 senators who communicated directly to the supreme leader of Iran. The person that they say can't be trusted at all, warning him not to trust the United States government. We have Mitch McConnell trying to tell the world, oh, don't have confidence in the U. S government's abilities to fulfill any climate change pledge that we might make. And now we have a senator suggesting that our Secretary of State is purposely misinterpreting. The deal and giving the supreme leader of Iran the benefit of the doubt in the interpretations. That's not how we're supposed to run foreign policy, regardless of who's president or secretary of state. We can have arguments, and there are legitimate arguments to be had. I understand why people might be mistrustful of Iran. I understand why people might oppose the deal, although the reason is not because this is a bad deal per se. But they just don't trust any deal with Iran, and may prefer to take a military approach to it. But when you start getting to the point where you are actively communicating that the United States government and our Secretary of State is somehow spinning presentations in a negotiation with a foreign power. Particularly one that you say is your enemy, that's a problem. It needs to stop. Jim Acosta. Oh, I'm sorry, where's Jim? Question, right here. President Obama, there you are. Question, thank you very much, Mr. President. I was wondering if you were struck by Raul Castro's warm words for you today. He said he admired you, said he had read some of your autobiographies, described you as an honest man. I'm just curious what you thought about that. And do you feel that Raúl Castro is an honest man and can be trusted? And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about another Secretary of State, Hillary. Clinton, who is expected to announce her campaign for the presidency tomorrow. Do you foresee being involved in her campaign? And do you hope that she runs on your record? Thank you very much. President Obama, it was a candid and fruitful conversation between me and Raúl Castro. I can tell you that, in the conversations I've had so far with him too on the phone and, most recently, face to face, that we are able to speak honestly about our differences and our concerns in ways that I think offer the possibility of moving the relationship between our two countries in a different and better direction. We have very different views of how society should be organized. And I was very direct with him that we are not going to stop talking about issues like democracy and human rights and freedom of assembly and freedom of the press, not because we think we are perfect and that every country has to mimic us exactly. But because there are a set of universal principles for which we stand. And one of the goals of my administration is to have some consistency. In speaking out on behalf of those who oftentimes don't have a voice. And I think during his speech in the plenary session, he was pretty clear about areas of U.S. policy he doesn't like. And I suspect he's going to continue to speak out on those. What's been clear from this entire summit, though, is the unanimity with which regardless of their ideological predispositions, the leaders of Latin America think this is the right thing to do. Because what they see is the possibility of a more constructive dialogue that ultimately benefits the Cuban people. And removes what too often has been a distraction. Or an excuse from the hemisphere acting on important challenges that we face. So I am cautiously optimistic that over the coming months and coming years that the process that we've initiated first announced in December, reaffirmed here at the Summit of the Americas, will lead to a different future for the Cuban people and a different relationship between the United States and Cuba. With respect to Hillary Clinton, I'll make my comments very brief. She was a formidable candidate in 2008. She was a great supporter of mine in the general election. She was an outstanding Secretary of State. She is my friend. I think she would be an excellent president. And I'm not on the ballot. So I'm not going to step on her lines. When she makes a decision to announce I'm confident that she will be very clear about her vision for the country moving forward, if she announces and in terms of her relationship with my administration. She was focused and working on really important foreign policy initiatives. And the one thing I can say is that she's going to be able to handle herself very well in any conversations or debates around foreign policy. And her track record with respect to domestic policy is, I think, one that cares about working families. If she decides to run and she makes an announcement, she's going to have some strong messages to deliver. Jim Avila. Question, thank you, Mr. President. First of all, on Cuba, if I could, 2 questions. The Cuban government has frequently said that it cannot allow more political or personal freedoms, or press freedoms. Because the United States has used both covert and otherwise actions to try to overthrow the Castros. Does your new era, in fact, end regime change efforts by the United States? And should the Cubans then respond by allowing free elections? And tolerance of dissent now because of the changed policy? And secondly, on the issue of Hillary Clinton, Vice President Biden. Of course, said that the Democratic race is wide open. The polls seem to say otherwise. What is your opinion on that? Is the race still wide open? President Obama, not only have I run my last election, but I am not in the business of prognosticating future elections. That is your job. Laughter. And there's no shortage of people. Who are happy to opine on that. I will not be one of them. On Cuba, we are not in the business of regime change. We are in the business of making sure the Cuban people have freedom and the ability to participate and shape their own destiny and their own lives, and supporting civil society.